Right. And we are recording this session. So I would like to welcome everybody to today's Globalization Expert web panel entitled Localization Quality Challenges at Netflix, eBay, and Tableau Software, an online roundtable discussion. Sonia from GoPro sends her best. Unfortunately, she had to a last minute business trip came up. So we were lucky enough to get Jose from eBay on this panel. And I would like to invite, we had over 200 people sign up for this online event. If you have questions for the panel, please submit them using the Q&A or the chat interface. Ideally, according to the topic that we'll discuss. And then, of course, I also would like to invite you to join a LinkedIn group measuring localization quality. All registrants will receive the link to the recording after the event, so feel free to share the recording as you see fit. David, you and I have been hosting these panels for about 3 to 4 years now. Lots of interest. We decided on this topic because you guys actually are sort of like a big player in the localization QA testing arena. You guys have a testing center in Israel. Just real quick, tell us more about that, and then let's start with the introduction of our panelists.
Sure, Chris. One thing, Chris, could you make the slides full screen so we could see it a little bit better?
Oh, you know what? Okay.
If you can.
Can you see it now?
All right, and we see it, but it's just not full screen. It's not as clear as it could be. I think you
That's
got it
always
now.
on a Mac. All right. Why don't you go ahead? I'll try to figure
All
it out.
right, so as Chris mentioned, we do have a localization testing lab in our headquarters offices in Israel. What Net-Translators has always been very much focused on localization quality, and that's one of the reasons that we started the Measuring Localization Quality group on LinkedIn. And we try to stimulate the discussion about quality because obviously we have a lot to learn about quality as we go along, and we're actively seeking how to improve our offerings as well. One of the things that we did discover years ago is that our location in Israel allows us access to IT professionals who are native speakers of several different languages, and in-house we have the ability to set up labs specifically for localization testing, and we cover over 30 languages in-house. So that pretty much is the impetus for our wanting to host a roundtable discussion, not necessarily a webinar, about localization quality. And fortunately, we have today three leaders in the field from three very interesting companies, and I thank Fergal, Jose, and Daniel for joining us today. Fergal, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and so we can get to know you and the other panelists as well.
Cool. Thanks very much, David and Chris. So, Fergal Meade is my name. Everybody originally from Ireland, but I've been in the Bay Area for about 15 years now. I've always been working in quality, so I worked in Semantic doing software security, both on host and intrusion detection, and then moving on to internationalization and localization in various kind of roles for about 12 years. Then I moved to PayPal for 2 years, doing more localization and automation testing. Then have been with Netflix here in Los Gatos for about 2 years now at this stage, coming up on a 2-year anniversary. Also doing localization quality. So glad to be here today.
Thanks, Jose.
Right.
Thanks, David. So my name is Jose Sánchez. I'm from Spain. I studied translation and interpreting there. And since then, I've been a little all over LTN roles. I was translator in Spain and the Netherlands. Then, 16 years ago, I moved to the Bay Area. And here I have done quality engineering, knowledge engineering, and also I have been a language specialist at eBay. And then for the last 3 years, I have been the manager for linguistic quality for machine translation systems in the company. So
Thank you.
that's me.
And finally, Daniel.
Sure. Actually, I got my start in academia. That was my first career. I was on a career track toward becoming a professor of Japanese literature, and the very last year in the program, I decided I wanted to do something else. And I'd already been doing translation as a business with my wife for about 10 years, and this was the natural next step for me. And I got my start in Amazon, and later moved on to a subsidiary of Hasbro, and I'm now at Tableau. In all three of these cases, I've focused pretty much on building out infrastructures for enterprise translation and making things a lot better. And currently, I am the architect of Tableau's localization platform, and I manage a team of project managers and regional localization specialists, and by extension, a larger team of editors who help us hit our quality bar and produce good work.
All right, thanks a lot. Chris, we still don't see the presentation. If you maybe should just go back to the way it was.
Yeah. You know, actually, I'm actually host, unfortunately, here. David, if you can maybe quickly make Daniel the presenter. I'm like, I am not able to move anything here. Or maybe I can...
Oh, actually, I don't have that deck open right now. I can try and find it real quick, though. Hold on a second.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know there was an issue with Mac and GoToWebinar, and I am not able to do anything here.
Oh, I think I've got it, actually. Yeah, I think I got it here. You can make me presenter. We can see if this will work.
All right, so while we're waiting for that, I suggest that we just move right on to our topics. What we have today is we have three topics that we'd like to cover today. I highly doubt that we're going to be able to cover them as fully as we'd like to, but we're going to try our best. The first topic is process, deals with process, and is how the translation localization challenges have evolved. The next topic is going to be localization quality management. We'd like to talk a little bit about the tools that we're using. And the final topic will be what does the future hold? So oh, I see some movement on there. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's trying to make me presenter.
Yeah. So let me...
I think, guys, this is Fergal here. Should I go first? Because I think I'm going to be tackling this first.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you make me presenter, and I'll go ahead on the first topic.
And I think I have control back. So, Fergal, you are presenter. Go ahead.
Fantastic.
Okay, good stuff.
So Fergal, oh, great. Okay, so take it away.
Let me just present this. So let me give, from my own perspective here at Netflix anyway, my view on how the localization challenges have changed and evolved. Can you see my screen? Is everything look good?
Yes.
Everything's great.
Okay, cool. So what we're trying to do here at Netflix is give the best local experience globally. And as you can imagine, I think everybody in the webinars is well aware of what Netflix is at this stage. This is a very, very big challenge. And from my own personal experience, it is extremely kind of daunting and very different to what I've done before, because when I worked both in Symantec and in PayPal, I was basically, both those companies are both bigger than Netflix actually, but they're serving businesses as well as customers, both in the security and payments world. Whereas Netflix, I moved to completely just serving customers or subscribers or users, whatever way we want to use them, in the entertainment business. And that's a very, very different model. And it's much more nimble, and the rate of change within this industry makes it very, very different from a development point of view and from a localization perspective. And there's probably, most of you are aware out there, there's a Netflix culture deck that talks about many, many things about how we work in Netflix. But because of the rate of change and what we're trying to offer our customers across all the different localized variants, it basically means that we have to be highly aligned and loosely coupled. So from a localization perspective, this means that I have the luxury of having my entire team here with me in Los Gatos. So I know this is definitely a luxury. You know, in previous companies, you know, the teams I had with me in headquarters, for want of a better word, were, you know, small and getting smaller sometimes, and my teams that were across Europe or India and China were growing, you know, for you know, decent reasons and maybe the right reasons. But here, because of the way in which we operate and the rate of change and the amount of A/B tests and product evolution and content changes and how we present our content to our users, it changes so much that we have to be here. And this is like a huge challenge for me, but it makes it, you know, so enjoyable working here as well. It's being, you know, being able to kind of work with the rest of the company, being able to interact with people, you know, all the time. Sometimes, you know, small meetings, you know, 5-10 minute meetings several times a day, working on many different kind of challenges. That's the real challenge, and that's the real difference for me. And this is how localization has changed for me right now. It's very, very different from what I was used to before. So, you know, what's really difficult for me right now, or the next challenge I have to solve, is keeping that flexibility, keeping the ability to be nimble to solve you know, challenges that we have, and giving our users the best experience at scale is something that I have to kind of think about all the time. And you know, I get to make, as I said, I have many small meetings every day, and we have to make many decisions every day. But my challenge is basically, I'm trying to make sure that I'm working on the best solutions to the best problems every day. So I can't solve them all. So I have to try and look at the work that all of my team has to do from a quality perspective, and keep those biggest ones and the most important ones here with me in Los Gatos, and then try to, by utilizing vendors that help me, you know, execute other aspects of my training or of my testing, I kind of move that out to help move these out to the vendors so they can help with the execution, and that helps me to kind of stay on top of, you know, all of the new challenges that are coming my way. The screen I'm showing you right now, this is our iOS offering, so you can see it's our French iOS offering. But what I mentioned on the screen right now is A/B tests. We have dozens of them, sometimes many of them going on at the same time, happening across, where we're just trying to make small changes that try to, you know, push the needle to see what's going to be the next, you know, biggest or smallest thing that just pushes the needle from our user's perspective. So it could be a case whereby we're showing you a different artwork. It could be that we're basically starting to autoplay the content in many different ways. We could be simplifying sign-up processes. We could be changing many things. But the point here is that all of these dozens of small changes, and some of them big changes, they happen all the time. They have to be localized all the time, and we have to be ready for them. And that's why it's so important that I'm able to be present, and my team is present, and they're empowered enough to be decisive in making these changes each and every day, so that they're, you know, closer ultimately to the customer. And as I'm showing you here on this last slide that I'm just going to present today, I didn't want to have a big long deck, but you know, when you have this many subscribers in that many countries, and we're localized in 22 countries, and it'll keep growing, we have to be really nimble. So that's the big challenge. That's the big thing that has changed for me in Netflix. It's a wonderful challenge, and it's every day is definitely something different. And being decisive in and of itself is something that is I'd highly recommend if you get to do it. It's a muscle that needs practice, but over many months of practice, you start to get better at it. And when you get better at making those decisions, and you'll get definitely a good chunk of them wrong as well, but as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, I think it works out well. But ultimately, it leads to you yourself and your team having better context. It leads to the localization team being much better positioned within the company, and ultimately helps you understand what are the small and or the big things that help you to turn the needle. So
Awesome.
Fergal, I'll just point out that there's, you know, one thing that what you've just described there is that one thing that has definitely not changed in this industry, and the participation in this webinar is a great example of that, is that quality and quality management does remain something of a perennial problem for us, or at least a topic of interest for us. And there are tons of ways that you can go about addressing this. It's fantastic, and I think actually that you've actually overcome one of the biggest challenges, and that is convincing upper to invest in this. Because if you have a team of in-house people that are completely dedicated to this, you've overcome basically a dream of a lot of smaller companies. Because what often happens is that, and this was true for Tableau when we were first going global. I'm talking about 3 or 4 years ago. Is that you've got a group of people who want globalized content, and they want to get it really cheaply, and they don't really understand that translation really is at the heart of things. It's a basic service, and there is another level of investment that you need to do in that in order to really up the quality bar. And that includes both people and technology. I think that there's this constant pursuit of a Shangri-La vortex where really high quality at a really cheap price is something that a lot of companies try and pursue for a while, and they often spin their wheels in that, and they'll really quickly think that, oh, it's the vendor's fault, so we need to change vendors, and they'll get into a process where they're spinning wheels with vendors and really not making any progress, or they have not yet seen the value in investing in tools that can help them overcome this. That doesn't mean that in order to reach higher quality bars, you need to invest in expensive software to do it, or expensive people, or bring, like what you've done, an entire team inside the company. There are various ways to address this cheaply or even for free, and we've utilized some of those. But again, you've actually really overcome one of the really big things, and what you've set in place is like the dream team that people want, a group of internal people that are dedicated to this. At the moment, I have 2 people internally who are part of their responsibility is dedicated to editing, and is dedicated to quality control, and is dedicated to establishing our voice in those languages. But we're not ready to invest in the team at the level you have yet, and so I have something of a hybrid, and I've worked with my vendor and hired a group of contractors who've been working with us for close to 2 years, and have achieved very much what you have. And so what I envision for our future actually is finding some balance between those. It's sort of a when does an editorial requirement exceed a threshold where it can no longer be met with contract editorial team alone and needs to be brought in-house.
Yeah, no, I totally understand, and that's definitely where I was in previous roles, that kind of hybrid situation, and then I totally understand that it's a luxury that I have. It's one of the reasons actually why I came here in the first place, because it was here, and when I heard about it, you need it though. You definitely, when you have something that's as nimble and as fast moving as the environment that we have in here, you absolutely need it, because we would definitely fail if I had to go outside, because you just take away that decision-making ability that we have here, that we need to put in place many times each day.
Right, and also without it, you can never get out of this perpetual loop of, you can never go back and actually educate the team that is providing the translated content for you. It's always just, you're stuck fixing things all the time, whereas if you do have like an editorial team like you have in place, you're able to do things like set up meetings with the translators and build in knowledge, and then really invest in the knowledge for the product that they're working on, and get ahead of quality issues that way, as opposed to always being reactive and always just fixing.
Absolutely.
Why don't we, Jose, do you want to chime in on what has changed, especially a company at eBay?
Yeah. So the eBay case is a little different, but I think it's maybe an example of things that are to come to many companies, as MT, machine translation, is used more and more for more purposes. So I completely agree with what has been said about the need to have in-house QA or linguists. And fortunately at eBay, when the machine translation initiative was launched about 3 years ago, this was understood from the start. So we hire linguists who had a special profile that will enable them to interact with the science teams that develop the MT systems. And over time, this has has proven very, very useful because the amount of expertise that they have built is really important, and they are the only voice from, let's say, a translator, traditional translator point of view, who can fill the gaps of quality in the product created by the anti-system. And we know that this is always going to be the case. You hear about statistical NT and now neural NT is coming, but it's always going to be the situation that you'll always need to have some good training data to build these systems and some good testing data to make sure they are performing up to par. And then you have to do QA. And for all of that, you're going to need humans and people who are very integrated with the technical side. So I think this is a wave that is coming to many companies. And in the translation community, the regular translators, freelancers, myself, when I started in this, people were very wary and are regarding how this is going to change the role of the translator. And I believe that there's a lot of potential for the role of the translator or the linguist becoming more interesting, not less, and adding more value, which means also probably getting better pay than it's been the case until now. Just to conclude this time, many translators think of MT as something that just is going to force them to become post-tators, kind of having to mind the machine and limit their correcting their quality contribution to fixing mistakes. But this is only a very small part of all the possible roles that linguists can have in the future. And this is something that we are seeing here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent.
Daniel,
Yeah.
Daniel, I just want to circle back to one of the points that you made. It's interesting from the vendor perspective. We see, companies on the full spectrum of the maturity model. What do you think is the tipping point? I mean, to me, it sounds like the tipping point between companies that are just trying to get high, the best quality at the lowest price, to the companies that are investing and enrolled in constant quality maintenance. That the tipping point comes not from the localization department, the stakeholders, but rather from management. Do you see that as so?
Yeah, so I definitely saw this a lot in my previous roles, and so when I came to Tableau, I felt like I was very equipped to deal with that, and I tried to get ahead of that as quick as possible. And we spent a massive amount of time just on proselytization about just localization in general, but also localization challenges, because at the very highest level, what they think localization or translation is basically this really simple process of taking an English string or English content and just producing an analog in another language. And like, what's so hard about that? And I mean, if you've got native speakers doing this, I mean, what's so hard about that, right? And even if you've got like an entire document and it's like, you've got all the context, so why does this sound so strange? And so what I've actually had to do is spend a lot of time just like really putting the technology at the front and really showing people how this works and how this operates. I mean, there was like a year where I felt like I was constantly doing these little mini webinars or little mini office hours, or even right now, still every single month I do a presentation for new people that are joining Tableau and show them a lot of this technology and how it works. And so I've gotten in front of it that way, and it's sort of like, you see all these people sort of light up and go, oh, okay, that's actually really hard, and they'll start to get it. I think that's one thing that is never going to go away. And the other part is that when these smaller companies that are just starting to go global, they all start at the same place. Oh, and by the way, I've seen this at the highest enterprise level too. But email through translation through email. Like, the email is your translation management system, and you're passing files back and forth that way. And when the files come back, and this was, again, true at Tableau, they come back and you sort of send them out to a group of people in the company who are, quote, native speakers. And they all give you your feedback, and it really is a mess. And so that's why I think showing why that's not going to work, why that's not scalable, and why that is not something that we can continue to do if a company is really invested in going global, was something I spent a lot of my first year doing, and it's what has allowed me to really build out the infrastructure and show immediate ROI in this too. Like eliminating a lot of churn and really centralizing the group of people who are in control of editing and Tableau voice in the other languages. But then also, you can't just like isolate these people. They can't operate in a silo. And so you also need to spend a lot of time about bridging communication channels, say, between those editors and any who the invested stakeholders in the regions are. And we spend a lot of time with that. And all that, I attribute a lot of our success to just good communication on that level.
Awesome. And actually, David, I think we got to move on to
that's a good intro to our second topic too.
All right. So let's talk about localization. It's a tools-driven process, right? Let's talk about integration, automation, measuring translation, localization, quality. Daniel, do you want to? I know you prepared slides. Do you want to take that on?
Sure. Just go ahead and make me the presenter, or watch for the cursor here.
All right. So I made you the presenter.
Okay, and let's see.
All right, there we go.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'll try and move through this pretty quickly.
Yep.
And I'm basically going to start here with how we started capturing quality, or at least our early experiments with it and where we are now, and some of the results of that. And then I can talk about some of the other tools we use and some of the other ways we do things to stay ahead of quality issues and also resolve quality issues that have made it through the post-production process. So really early on when we rolled out our translation management system, we obviously over here on the left, you can see we experimented with a lot of quality models. We experimented with a native quality model and process within our translation management system. Wasn't fantastic, had a lot of issues. It needed to, it really only worked within the tool itself. You couldn't do it within something like Trados. And it was just, there were some frustrations with that. And so we did not really use this for very long at all. So we quickly moved on to something that we felt was a little more nimble. And that was a form-based process like this. This allowed us to capture great data, but it was incredibly manual. And I didn't feel like I was really getting a lot of investment from the editorial team on this. And I think that's attributable to the fact that it was manual. And also it was really challenging for me to show the results of all of their work because these are isolated spreadsheets. We did eventually build a process where we were loading these into a single database and putting Tableau on top of that to show the data, but it was, again, really manual process. And we were doing this at the segment level, but it was just too manual for that. And so what we eventually switched over to was TAUS DQF. And this was based on a conversation I had with Jaap in Berlin, and he introduced this to me. And I went back to Tableau and immediately set this up in a database that we were already using with the editors for them to track their work on projects. And so I thought, okay, we really don't have the infrastructure or the technology to track quality at the segment level right now, but we do have a way where we can at least do this at the project level, and at the same time we can also start getting our editorial team accustomed to the TAUS model, because none of them were really familiar with it. And in fact, when we first rolled it out, there was a lot of push because they thought, well, I don't understand why there are 5 verticals, and I think we can collapse these. And I just said, no, there's a reason for this, and in a year and a half, you're going to find out why. And so they really embraced this, and they started just every single project that they ran for us. They had to log their hours and a number of other things, but then at the very end of the form, they logged numbers for us across these 5 verticals. And the result is something like this. And I've got a really nice 30,000-foot snapshot of quality level of content, and this is the quality level of content coming back from translation. And it's the quality of the translations that the editors are working on and fixing up. And they assign a quality score for us. So I've crossed these 5 verticals here. And this dashboard is something I'm constantly looking at. I'm looking for little dips and valleys and things like that. And when those come up, I can really quickly address that with our vendor and say, hey, what's going on? Is this a content issue? Is it what's driving this? We can also use the same database to, again, track across these 5 verticals over time and down by language. And again, this has been extremely helpful for us. And the best example I have for this is for Japanese. Our Japanese specialist is quite amazing at their job, and she's quite amazing at embracing these sort of things, and I owe a lot to her for this. She's using the same data here, but she's going at a much granular level for us. She's isolating things like whether or not the content needed transcreation or not. We know who the editor that was working on there. But what she's isolated here, and again, this is last year, was that we did have a quality issue in Japanese. And just with this data, she was able to isolate that for us, visualize that for us, and show us. And so what we did was we said, okay, we clearly have a problem here. What's going to be our solution? And we set about creating monthly meetings with the entire editorial team that included our internal person and our external editors, and also the translators, and just starting building in a knowledge and understanding of our tools, processes, our language, everything in order to get ahead of this quality problem. And just within a few months, this is what the landscape started to look like. So it's really easy for us to see ROI on some sort of investment like this.
Actually, hey, Daniel.
Yeah.
Quickly, a question. Who is doing the quality evaluation?
So for Japanese, for this particular one here, this is our internal editor for Japanese.
Okay.
She also works with a team of 2 other editors who are contractors, because she can't do all the work by herself. She cannot handle the volume by herself. And we're not about to invest in a lot more editors for one language. And so she works with a team of contractors for that.
Awesome.
There are another, I can show you some more stuff, but I think what I'd rather do is just, I'll pass this over to the rest of the team and see if they've got anything else that they wanted to add.
Well, let's hear from eBay. Jose, if you want to chime in.
Yeah.
I'm going to share.
Can you see my screen?
Hang on, I'm going to pass it over to Jose. Bang, and you are the presenter. So go ahead and click on share screen. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So I guess our case may address the third topic, which is the future of quality in localization. So eBay, as you must be aware of by now, it's using MT in order to translate listings and other content in order to facilitate cross-border trade. So what I'm going to do is quickly describe how this is done in my company, how our job is a little different from other MT cases. I'll give you a little illustration and example so you can see it in context. I'll also describe how linguistic QA fits into the general, more technical workflow of MT. And finally, I'll give you some details on the principles we apply and the tools that we use for our QA. So, to be short, eBay uses MT for reasons that are pretty compelling for us. It's not simply to cut down costs on translation or to speed it up, although that's always nice, of course, but also because by translating the listings created by our sellers, we make it possible for more transactions to happen, which is good for our users, and it's also good for us, of course, for our bottom line. Now, we have a few challenges that are pretty unique to our case, although they may be shared by other e-commerce companies. One of them is that we have user-generated content. We deal with listings created by users who are not used to writing for the public. They don't have to go through any training. So, as you can imagine, it's not always standard, it's not always grammatical. Another problem or challenge is that we cover a lot of categories. We have over 12,000 categories, from auto parts to antiques to fashion. You name it, we have it. And many of those have their own vocabulary and even slang. On top of that, the volumes are very large. Our systems in production are handling millions of words per month. The systems we have in development require hundreds of thousands to millions of words for training. And this brings us to another issue, which is how do you find the right corpora to train your engines for this? So, the specific content that we deal with is, as I mentioned, item titles, item descriptions, generally things that the user will see and will help them buy. We also do some member-to-member communication translation. The two main languages that we work with are English and German. They are the languages where most sellers work in our site. And the target languages are the most common purchasing countries. Mostly the direction is from English and German into those languages. However, we also have the special case of the search queries, where we have to translate in the opposite direction. And the next slide will help you understand how this is needed. This is a typical page in the eBay site. This is ebay.com, our global hub. You can be a user from Latin America and have the UI in your own language, Spanish. And our idea is you have to be able to do the whole transaction without even knowing that the seller uses English as his language. So what happens is, as a buyer, you enter your keyword, and you see that at the top, reloj de hombre, which will translate into something like man wrist's watch. So we translate this into English in the back end. We run a search in the inventory, and we come up with several listings that match that search. As you can see, the listing titles are translated. If you want, you can hover over the listing title, and you will see the original. You will also have the opportunity as a user to rate our translation, which is, of course, very useful for us in order to improve our engines. There is also a service to provide description translations. This is optional at the moment, and we are using a third party, but we are about to roll out our own version of our empty systems for this kind of content as well. So now you have an idea of how we apply our work. Another question to answer is, how does the linguistic QA work fit within the general workflow of MT? So MT requires statistical MT, the one that we use, requires corpora to train the engine. This means parallel text, English and Spanish, for instance. So the system can learn which words in English correspond to which words in Spanish. In order to train our engines, we have to create specific in-domain corpora or texts that contain the words or vocabulary used by our users, by our sellers. So what we do is this. We extract the listings from the eBay site. We run them through an external third-party engine just to get some basic translation to start with. Then we send this to our vendors for post-editing to improve the quality enough. That's where our team of machine translation linguists come in. And they have to perform a very targeted, very efficient QA, because we are handling, as I mentioned, hundreds of thousands of words per quarter. Once this is done, we feed the data to the engine, hopefully to improve its quality. This refers to training data. As you may be familiar with, if you hear about machine learning these days, any kind of machine learning, and MT is one of those, has to provide two kinds of data: the training data to improve the system, and the testing data to check against. This is a golden reference, and the MT team evaluates against. And for this, we also provide the quality in this more typical LTNM process: source text, vendor translates, we perform our QA, and we provide it to the MT team. Now, this is the last slide.
Yes? If I can interrupt just real quick. Just a quick question. Do you use machine translation for all languages? And Japanese was also thrown in there. Do you use it for all languages?
No. For the time being, we use it for these languages. So English into German, French, Italian, Spanish, Russian, and Portuguese.
Great, thank you.
We have some other systems in development, and one of them is Japanese, but not for the time. It's not scheduled to go online anytime soon.
Great.
Okay, so just to conclude, and this might be the most interesting part, maybe. How do we do this? How do we handle QA for big volumes of words that require very quick turnaround? Well, we have some principles that we apply consistently. One of them is we have to automate as much as possible. So we started very simply using open source tools, and this is the way they integrate. Our vendor gives us the post-edit content for QA. The first thing that we do is we compare the source, well, the content they provide with the one we sent them to make sure that post-editing has happened at high enough level. Because often we find that not all the segments have been covered. So this is a very quick check to do. It will save us time. It will save time to the vendor. If they pass this check, then we go to the automated QA part. And for this, again, we use open source quality reporting tools like Checkmate or language tool that you may have heard of. We run grammar checks, spelling checks, terminology. We also create our own regular expressions to target specific problems that we have detected. This creates a report. Often, there may be cases where this is false positives, but still it gives you kind of a snapshot of the quality. Enough for us to decide whether we should go on with manual evaluation or send back to the vendor. Now, if we pass this test, then it goes to our MTLS. But because their time is very valuable and we don't have a lot of we have a lot of work coming down the pipeline, we target our sampling. So how do we do this? For empty output, for post-editing, you can, for instance, check by edit distance. You can see how much editing has happened in a given segment. If it is, if it exceeds a certain range, it may be they have under-edited or over-edited the content. So this is one of the ways. Another way, for instance, is to check for potentially more likely problems, more likely content to give problems. For instance, polysemous words. If a word has more than one possible meaning, it is more possible that the empty system got it wrong and that the post editor missed that. So that's something we also use to filter. And well, this is a quick summary of the process we follow now. Just as kind of a teaser, we have developed a new platform now that will allow us to integrate the work of our post editors with our own team with an online post editing tool, and also integrating our QA checks more upstream, which is another of the things that we look for. Now,
Jose,
yes.
Two things. The first question regarding the process where you have the file comparison. What type of percentage of change are you looking for here?
We want to have covered a considerable amount of content. We know the quality of the empty output that we are sending out, so we have a certain idea, it depends on the system, of how much it should be edited. But if it is less than 70%, I mean, if at least not 70% has been edited, then it is a reason to raise a flag.
Okay.
But again, this depends on the quality of the empty system output.
Right, and in terms of your error rates, how do you set the error rates after the automated QA?
Do you mean how do we set our error thresholds?
Correct. What do you base that on?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that there's a lot of false positives. We get that too. We get a lot of false positives, and the only way that we can validate the real quality is to do a manual review. We don't, I mean, the automated QA we find is a way of identifying certain areas of weakness, for instance, terminology, if there's a high rate of terminology errors. But you know, if you sort of just say, okay, here's all the errors, it would be interesting to hear how you get that error rate.
I think you're pointing at a typical situation here, which is you can automate only that far and not more. You can generate automated error reports, and then you will need a human to evaluate and say, okay, so this is acceptable or not. So yes, we do get a lot of false positives, especially in our case. For instance, the spell checker will catch a lot of brand names that are not really typos and things like that. So it is human judgment that decides whether it is acceptable or not. We find that we reach a certain agreement with our vendors, because it's also a part of a dialogue we have with them, of what percentage is enough. And so I think we have like maybe 60% of false. If you had 100% of reported errors, the average of false positives maybe 50 to 60%. So that gives you an idea of how much actual errors you have, and this is something that you can track.
Right.
And polish over time.
Right.
Actually, we were getting a lot of comments about this topic. I have a question for Fergal. Is eBay using a out-of-the-box machine translation engine, or is it proprietary or created out of Moses?
That
Take
was
that
for
for
Jose.
Yeah. So it's actually. Sorry, Jose. Yes.
Well, if Fergal wants to answer, that's fine. I'm kidding. So no, we don't use, well, sometimes to produce a training in-domain training corpora. The first step sometimes is to use an out-of-the-box external entity system because it's simply a bottom line, something that provides the minimum required quality. But in general, we develop our own systems, and our goal is always to have our own in-house systems. And this is because the eBay content is very specific, as I mentioned, and really a generic empty system is not going to perform best.
Okay. All right. Actually, quick question, Fergal. Are you guys doing machine translation?
It's not my area at all, to be honest with you, but I know it's been certainly piloted in a couple of components, but it would be, I think, possibly in components like customer support or help center areas where it would be better suited. I don't think you could ever get to a stage where you could machine translate the synopsis, because they're so creative and they're so heavily nuanced in the first place that, you know, it's really the Rolls Royce of translation, and I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it could be quite hard to machine translate that.
Yeah.
And I can dovetail on that. I mean, with what Fergal said, I mean, we do use machine translation for some things. It's mainly for testing purposes, and we've had a few little pilot projects and stuff, but our content is not the type that can be done with machine translation. There is some, but for the same reason, we cannot have that. We can't use that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think machine translation has very specific scenarios. The eBay case makes sense because we have millions of words, and because it is either you use MT or you use nothing. There's no way we could provide this service any other way.
Yeah.
So we understand it's not 100% quality, but it is better than not having a translation. So.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, can I just show something really quick again, just on the current topic? Because I showed how we are capturing quality on the back end, but not how we're getting ahead of that. And I just want to make sure I can just really quickly show what we're doing there. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So at the beginning of the year, actually no, it was about this time last year, we kicked off a project where we were integrating our CMS, which is Drupal, with our TMS. And the main reason for doing that was to eliminate a manual step in our workflow, but also to try and find a way where we could give the editors a lot more control over the content, so they weren't just delivering content back to us. We were publishing it and then waiting 2 or 3 days for them to see that and get feedback from them. And it's just a really manual process. What this tool, kitchensink, has allowed us to do, and kitchensink is basically a piece of middleware that we developed. We can push one page, or as of late, we can push our entire website to our TMS, and goes through translation process. And then once it goes through the translation process, it goes to our editorial team. They do their work, you know, they can do it in Trados or in World Server, doesn't matter where. But when they're done and they load it back into our TMS, what they do is they will just basically select one of these pieces of content here, and they click this trigger Drupal button, which pushes that piece of content to our website in draft form, where it's not publicly consumable yet, but now the editor can actually see their work in context on the page and exactly what it's going to look like. And there can be a little bit of back and forth between this. They might push the content to our website, look at it in draft, say, oh, I see a little break issue there. I need to go and move that break tag. Or, oh, this actually isn't going to work because this string is too long and it's really not going to work there, or whatever. They can do whatever they want, so that when they do finally complete their project in our TMS and sign off on it, it's also basically a trigger to us that they have completely vetted and done all the UAT as part of the translation workflow, as opposed to something that happens later and is very reactive and is dealing with translation issues that happen later. And then we, of course, are capturing all this data and monitoring this with a dashboard like this, which is basically an integration of our TMS and our CMS databases so that we can really quickly and easily see what is in the pipeline, what they're working on, and if any questions that come up that are preventing them from completing a project, they can use this to really quickly address that with us. And even still, if something does get through the system and does get on the site and they need to get feedback to us, we don't handle that in email. We've got a tool on our website called UserSnap. This is a wonderful little tool. And you just click on that and it does a screenshot of the site. You can do all sorts of ways of marking up the page, and that gets into our QA system, and then we do a triage of that content, and then we can really quickly address any quality issues that have, for whatever reason, made their way through the kitchensink process.
Awesome. Let me see. Let me head back to, we're running out of time, unfortunately. Why don't let's use this as a gateway into topic number 3. What does the future hold? Sort of like a very broad topic. I mean, we already started with machine translation, right? Varying quality acceptance levels. What's the future of the industry and its various stakeholders? Maybe just a quick word from Jose. Where do you see machine translation going? You're the machine translation expert. Where are we in 5 years from today?
Well, I think we're gonna see it's gonna become much more user-friendly, much more translator-friendly. There are already tools out there that are making it much better for the translators to increase their productivity and to avoid the drudgery work. It's kind of the same evolution that happened with translation memories. People were afraid in the 90s that it was gonna make machine-like the work of the translator. Instead, it saves them a lot of time and it lets them focus on the creative side. So there are tools like Lilt, you can find it online, lilt.com, that provides adaptive machine translation. So the user starts typing, and after a few segments, you will see that kind of an autocomplete feature will start offering the additional translations to the user based on their choice of words and style. And this is pretty cool. Another thing is a frustration for post-editors have always been that their feedback, the way to improve the empty system for them is very limited or non-existent. They can find the same error over and over and over again. So I think it's going to end pretty soon, much sooner than 5 years. We are seeing incremental training for empty systems, which means as soon as the post-editor has entered the translation, this is added to the translation table and is fed back immediately in the next segment. So that's one thing. Another thing is faster cycles, more integration between vendors and clients through online platforms. This I think applies beyond machine translation. It's something we're implementing now with Medcat. But basically, more partnership, more through APIs, through tools that are online that the users can, the post-editors or translators, can access wherever they are, and they can get immediate feedback from the client through the comments or through sample early editing, which will save time for everybody. QA is going to get much better too, which may make unnecessary those automatic QA reports I talked about before. Machine learning is going to help a lot there. There are going to be correction suggestions that we don't think about now, beyond terminology or spelling. So those are a few things. Of course, there's also crowdsourcing. There's a lot that can be done with crowdsourcing to integrate it with the MT process. What I don't think will happen is that human linguists become superfluous. On the contrary, I think they're going to be more necessary and their jobs are going to be more interesting.
Awesome. Why don't we, I'm going to throw in a question from early on. You know, how do you measure quality? I mean, that's very subjective. How do you measure quality? And that's a question for Netflix. What is good quality? How do you define good quality? And what A/B tests do you do for quality? Maybe Fergal, talk a little bit about quality on a broad scale here.
Sure. So I'll separate the A/B test from the quality for a sector. But to me, there's two ways to to measure the quality. There's the objective and then there's the subjective. The objective, we're definitely a bit down that road, maybe never getting to the end point, but objectively it's my goal is to look at the product, look at the service, just making sure we have our testing, whether it's through functional automation or other manual, to ensure that we have the coverage. So we can first check to make sure that everything that needs to be assessed from a quality perspective is assessed, and then from that you have the defects or the issues that come from that. So they're objectively describing the quality of what you have assessed, and then you put remediation in place or try to put issue prevention in place so that you stop these from happening going forward. But another aspect that's harder to quantify, but is yet still important, especially for us in Netflix, is subjective quality. So what I mean by that is, we could offer the service around the world, and it could be, functioning very, very well, and it could be, linguistically correct, but, it may not be conveying the right type of messaging, or the language we're using may not be resonating as well with the users as it could be. So for those types of quality subjective elements, we need to listen to our customers in that regard. So an aspect of them will be, are they watching the shows or are they turning off, so we can get it from that. But also we listen through social channels as well. So our community is very, very active. Whenever we launch a major show like Orange is the New Black or House of Cards, immediately or even before it goes, people are on Twitter talking about it and other social channels. So when we see issues like this, we try to tackle that or try to manage that. Getting a score from those subjective comments is a lot more difficult, but I think that's something that we're keen to try and grow and improve on going forward.
Awesome. And actually, a question from the audience as well. What's how much you spend percentage-wise on quality, overall localization budget, if you have that approximate number available, or percentage?
I'm not sure I have the total picture there on that one. So that's maybe something we could take offline if I had a more accurate figure.
All right. Daniel, do you have a number there?
Do I have a number for the
percentage, I guess, if you have to break it down, how much you spend, or percentage-wise, on quality assurance?
So at the moment, like I said earlier in the call, is that there are tools that you can invest in initially, and what we did was we just tacked on a few more columns in a database where we can capture quality scores, and that's pretty much free. The only place we've really had to make any investment is in software, and it's minimal. And I'd be happy to take that offline as well with anyone. So.
Okay, awesome. David, did you field the questions from the audience by chance? Do you have any round out the quality aspect here?
Oh boy, there's so many questions here. One of the things that we covered a little bit of the tools. So there is a question that was posed about maintaining quality with high volume and urgent needs. What I'd like to actually sort of turn this around, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but what's interesting to me is that we have 3 different panelists who represent really 3 different types of translation consumers. And Fergal would define quality, obviously, and he did, differently than Daniel. Daniel is working in a much more technical and exacting environment, whereas Fergal and Jose's environments have to be more creative, and certainly Jose's environment has to be more about the user experience. Rather than being creative. So the question, I think we could turn this around, is how do you manage these high volumes and meeting your intended goals, which is very broad, but do you find that to be your main challenge?
Why don't we start with Jose?
Yeah, so this is one of the main challenges. I think this this kind of points to the topic that quality definition has changed in the last few years, right? It used to be quality was either 100% or nothing, and it all depended on the point of view of the reviewer, the translator who reviewed. Nowadays, we have access to the users, and we can ask the user whether they think that's quality good enough for them. And we can have different levels of requirements and still meet our goals. So that's the first thing that we did at eBay. We check the feedback from our users. Fortunately, we have a very practical way of doing that, because if the user finds the translation good, sales are supposed to go up. So the increase in our GMV shows us whether the quality is making an impact. So this is one way we measure it. Another thing is we have to align our criteria for quality with the user finds. So we compare what the user valued as positive or negative feedback with our error typology, which, by the way, is based on the DQF NQM, which we use in order to try to stay aligned with the standard of marked by 1,000 other organizations. So these are some ways that we handle the quality issue.
Right. And we're actually already 2 minutes over. Fergal, maybe last thoughts from you, and then also Daniel, one last thought about the overall topic that we discussed today.
Sure, just to kind of briefly to say on that last topic. So volume really, I mean, certainly when you're comparing Netflix to eBay, we don't compare at all. So it's kind of chalk and or apples and oranges from that perspective. But even I would say, you know, compared to other companies, the volume of what we translate here is probably not as much as it is in other places. But for us, and it kind of gets back to the fact that we have our team locally here, it's so important that we really resonate with our customers. Like, so to give you one small example of, you know, we all know the Netflix experience is very, very easy to use, and even it's very easy to cancel. So we have a very simple process of like our way of saying it here in the US, it's just cancel anytime. And it's just 2 words, but basically a lot of thought goes into that, because a lot of people typically would have issues, you know, canceling their Comcast or canceling their long, you know, cell phone agreements and stuff like that. So even those 2 words, we spend a lot of time in crafting and understanding how do we best say those 2 words in Brazil or in France or in Japan to convey the same type of messages. So we look at it a different kind of a way.
Awesome. Daniel.
And for my part, I'm really excited about the next year because we've invested in a new term database, we've invested in a robust query management system, and I'm really excited to see what that does for us with respects to mostly addressing quality issues before they even are an issue. I'm really excited to put Tableau on top of that data. And then I'm really excited to see the results of a project we're working on right now to basically create a dashboard that has vital signs for a web page down to the page and language level, and basically taking all of this data that we're capturing from these various disparate tools and databases and bringing it all together in a very meaningful way that's simple to digest and it's easy to demonstrate ROI all the way up to the top.
Awesome. I mean, you guys are sought after speakers. You travel the world, you speak at conferences. So I'm sure, I mean, there's still a lot of unanswered questions here. We're probably going to meet hopefully a lot of the people that were on this web panel today. David, I mean, I would like to thank our panelists. David, any last thoughts about this topic that we discussed today?
Well, obviously, there's a lot going on in localization quality, and I invite everyone to join our Measuring Localization Quality group on LinkedIn. We can continue the conversations there. Your colleagues are there, and they're more than happy to answer your questions. And if you request, we'll certainly we'll approve your request.
All right, awesome.
Chris and David, thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, this was really good. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks a lot for being on this panel. Maybe we can do a round 2 sometime down the road. Again, thanks everybody for your interest, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. All right.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.